libertarians. Can I, okay? Today is the week. And you libertarians bring the best for us Latinos and best for Americans of the left, that tolerance that you have that is really beautiful, that is really God-given. That tolerance is beautiful. And then on the right, this fiscal seriousness, this economic way of having a small government, of getting out of our pockets and getting out of our bedrooms, as Johnson Weld says so much. You bring together for us Latinos really the best. Thank you so much, libertarians, for hanging in there for all of these years, and thank you for allowing me, the newcomer, to participate. I will tell you that in Latin America, people know Gary Johnson and Bill Weld. Vicente Fox exactly was asking me to say hello, and Governor Weld doesn't know this, okay? He said, salúdame al gobernador Weld, ¿sí? Sin él no hubiera habido TLC. Él fue el gran promotor del TLC. He said, tell Governor Weld hello from me. We would not have NAFTA if it hadn't been for Governor Weld. He was one of the great promoters of the great relationship that Mexico has with the United States and with Canada. Millions of jobs have been created in all three countries. I know that you know all about the governor from Massachusetts. It's my incredible honor to introduce you to el gobernador William Weld y el próximo vicepresidente de Estados Unidos de América.
So it's wonderful to be back in Vegas. This is our third or fourth trip to Vegas, our fourth or fifth to Nevada. Since we started this wonderful operation, it's a little known fact, but the Johnson Weld ticket was born in Las Vegas, Nevada. So Gary and I served together as governors, and we were kind of a mutual admiration society back even then. My first exposure to him was a movie played at a governor's meeting where he came down a ski slope, did a double somersault in midair, and landed in the pail of water on his skis. I figured, this is my kind of guy. I may not be able to hang with him all the way, but I kind of like his style. And the more I got to know Gary, the more I did admire his style. And before the convention this year, and I admired his run in 2012, I was still in the R column at that point. But I admired everything he did there, and just have self-identified as a libertarian since the 70s, as has Gary, small L libertarian. And he called before the convention and said, well, what about running together as a ticket? Because he and I had discussed the fact that we were both small L libertarians back when we were in office. And he thought he was going to have a big uphill slog on his hands, and that conversation lasted about 10 minutes. And my wife and I were on a plane to Las Vegas that same evening from Boston, Massachusetts. Gary was flying in from Detroit the next morning. So we got together. We were staying at Wynn Encore. Gary was staying over at Harrah's, and we got together for 4 hours and hammered out. Well, there was nothing to hammer out except to shake hands on the deal. We discussed how we were going to do it, and it's panned out exactly that way. And it's total teamwork, total partnership, do everything together. It's not a luxury that the other tickets have. They were not exactly choosing each other from day one. And over time, I think the electorate is going to see that as an advantage, that you get a real partnership in office and you get two for the price of one, and there's no kind of uncomfortableness between the members of the ticket. And it's been a total joy. I must say it's getting to be more of a joy every week. At the beginning we were kind of counting what states, could we win to throw this into the House. Those days are long past us. something happened 3 or 4 weeks ago, and if you've been in a lot of political campaigns, and I've been in 4 of my own and a whole bunch of presidential campaigns, sometimes as finance chairman, sometimes a little bit more in the wings, but something at the table, preparing presidential candidates for debates, and you can really tell when something is going on. You can almost feel it. I felt it in my own body about 3 weeks ago when adrenaline kicked in. And since then, I won't say I haven't slept, but I know my last day off is behind me, put it that way. But it doesn't seem like work. I jump out of bed into both pant legs at the same time every morning. And, you know, the situation with just the 2 candidates, when Gary and I got together, it was just Trump and Clinton and no real enthusiasm for either of them. The situation was what I like to call hopeless but not serious. It wasn't hopeless for us. It looked like not very hopeful for the United States, but it was not serious because there was a solution to address the problem of those 2 candidates and the kind of feeling in the United States. And the more we got into this, the more clear it was that the monopoly parties, the R and the D party in Washington, have not exactly earned their position as monopolists. You know, think of the amount of constructive legislation that's come out of Washington to benefit the people of the United States in the last several sessions. It's just not there. And the reason is the poisonous hyper-partisanship in Washington, which is partly caused by hyper-gerrymandering, but whatever caused it, the parties are dug in. And you have the Senate Majority Leader saying, my only job is to make sure the President of the United States fails. That's frankly not very civic. And you have the 2 parties. The 2 parties seem to be locked in a death struggle and an embrace. It's an embrace because they're united in wanting to perpetuate their power in Washington, and it's a death spiral because they want to slander each other more than they want to achieve anything for the American public. I think that is settling in. So along we come, and a few things become evident in terms of the path forward. We are fiscally responsible and socially tolerant. Fiscalmente responsable y socialmente tolerantes. Okay? That's a combination that's shared by 55 to 60% of the American public, but not by either one of the major parties. Nobody would accuse or confuse the Democratic Party with being fiscally responsible, not with all the promises of everything being free. Nobody would view the Republican Party as being socially welcoming or tolerant after they moved their own platform, which was already mean-spirited, and they tweaked it a little bit to make it even more mean-spirited in Cleveland this year. So they're giving us a 6-lane highway right up the middle to drive through. Now, there's 2 steps to our being able to run the table here. Step number 1, as Gary frequently says, is getting into the presidential debates. There's a couple of ways to get there. There's a couple of ways to get there. The most highly publicized is to poll 15% in 5 different polls. That's probably a first or second week in September decision by the commission, if that's the yardstick. Gary's been polling at 10, 11, 12, 13%, and that's with only 30% of the people in the country having the faintest idea who we are, okay? And we haven't begun to advertise, but we've been raising $1 million a day the last 2 weeks, and we're going to advertise now. I won't say it's child's play, but with the amount of media attention that's going to be focused on this third-party issue, and the commission has already told the venues, plan for 3 lecterns. But just organically, the natural growth of our name recognition in the country, if that goes from 30 to 50 with all the rallies and travel that we're now getting into doing, you know, we were in Miami last night, we've been here several times, we got Albuquerque on Saturday, we're going to do 4 in New England next week, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Massachusetts. I know some people there, okay? And we're going to be getting around the country, and it's just inevitable that that name rec is going to go up to 50%. And I think it's equally inevitable, given that Gary Johnson is the most likable guy in public life in America. When he goes from 27% name rec to 50% name rec, it seems to me quite likely that his favorables are going to go from 12 or 13 to more than 15. That's not much of a stretch. So I think it's a distinct majority likelihood that we're going to be in those debates.
Yeah.
Something I'm pretty sure of, having hung around the National Press Corps for a long time, is that on the day that statement is made that we're going to be in the debates, and let's say it's September 10th or September 15th, from that day forward until November 8th, we, as well as the Republicans and Democrats, are going to be the subject of massive page 1 network publicity every single day. So that's when we get to make our argument. We talk about how we're fiscally responsible. We talk about how, we think immigration is a good thing. We don't want to demonize immigrants. We talk about how we don't want to set Americans against each other, which both candidates in a way are doing. Both candidates are waving the bloody shirt. That's a Civil War reference, and it's not good for the United States. And when Gary and I are out there on the television speaking reasonably, it's going to be a stylistic contrast to the other two candidates who are going to be simply screaming at each other. So Mrs. Clinton is going to say this is all going to be free. Mr. Trump is going to say only I can save you. I think the American people are pretty smart. Voters are very smart at the end of the day, and I don't think they're going to go for either one of those platforms. But at the end of the day, also, the great advantage, the substantive advantage that Gary Johnson and Bill Weld have is that nobody can say we didn't, in our 2 terms each, that we didn't change our states. We changed our states. We were both elected Republican governors, succeeding Democratic governors in Democratic states that were in economic and fiscal trouble when we took office. We both cut spending. We were rated the 2 most fiscally conservative governors in the United States at different times in the 1990s. We cut taxes. I cut taxes 21 times, never raised them. Gary cut taxes 14 times and never raised them. He vetoed 750 spending bills, was overridden 2 or 3 times. We did other stuff too. I put in a work requirement for welfare, which made the welfare rolls drop by 75%. We put in high-stakes testing for education that resulted in Massachusetts having the highest test scores in both reading and math every year for men and women. And the states are laboratories of democracy, and both Gary and I like to think, did a lot of creative things. But the most important thing we did was to yank our respective states to the right, to a more conservative position on budget and spending issues. And that's just what Washington, D.C. needs today. The budget that we have today in Washington, with all the excess spending, is a huge burden on our economy, both domestically and internationally. And when Gary and I file a balanced budget within our first 100 days, not only the country, but the whole world is going to take notice that the United States is coming back to a position of responsibility and leadership. when we have the opportunity to make those arguments that I've just been referring to on a stage with, more people watching than are watching the Super Bowl, it's not going to be too tough to get from 15 to 20 in the month of August. It's not going to be too tough to get from 20 to 25 in the month of September. And you show me 3 tickets going into October where one of them is at 25% and was at 5% 3 months ago. And the other 2 are at 35%, and they were at 45% 3 months ago. I'll tell you who's going to win that election. It really is true, and I've been on both sides of this phenomenon, winning and losing in elections. But if you're going to the last month of an election and you get your choice between money, organization, and momentum, you want momentum. And the guy who is going to lead the 100-yard dash that we all are going to perform like Usain Bolt in service of that momentum is the man I give to you now, the next President of the United States, Gary Johnson.
Craziest election ever. And how crazy is it? I'm going to be the next president of the United States. Wow. You got to listen to Bill Weld. Beyond my wildest dreams, Bill Weld was my running mate. When I was governor, we interlapped, and Bill was known as the smartest governor of all the 50 governors. Bill called me honest Gary. Well, I'm running with brainy Bill. Honest Gary, brainy Bill. And you know what? If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. It works. It does work. People ask me all the time, what's it like to have been the former governor of New Mexico? I gotta tell you, in New Mexico, people wave at me with all 5 fingers, not just one. It's a good thing. It is. I think most people in this country are libertarians. It's just that they don't know it. And that is, keep government out of my bedroom and keep government out of my pocketbook. And I think that's what most of us do. Fiscally conservative. I've got one piece of advice here tonight for all of you. And my advice is worth exactly what you're paying for it, which is nothing. But the advice I have is that take what it is that you know and apply it entrepreneurially. You will never have a greater reward than doing that. And as difficult as it will be to become that entrepreneur tomorrow, it'll never be easier than tomorrow. Create your own job. Create jobs for others. And government can play a role in all this, making that as easy as possible. Leveling the playing field. I think that the model of the future is the sharing economy, Airbnb, Uber. Uber everything, eliminating the middleman, allowing for you to provide your goods, your services directly to the end user. End user pays less money, you make more money. That's the model of the future. Airbnb. Las Vegas, there just has to be all sorts of opportunity to rent your place out, to make some extra money. I was talking to a young woman in Baltimore who got her PhD in science. And she said, I have these horrendous student debts, but I figured out a way to pay those debts back. Airbnb. I've been renting my place out. I've been making enough money. I can see that I'm going to actually be able to pay back my student debts. But the city of Baltimore moved in and banned Airbnb. And that's Hillary. That's Hillary. You know, like it or not, anti-Uber, anti-Airbnb. Kate and I, my partner, best friend, fiance, we have this great place in Santa Fe. Doesn't Santa Fe ban Airbnb? Don't they recognize that if we were able to rent our place out, we'd have more money to spend in Santa Fe with Santa Fe merchants? Crony capitalism is alive and well in this world, okay? And what is crony capitalism? Crony capitalism is when government involves itself in business. When government picks winners and losers, and they do it, and government is for sale. Those that have money and influence pay for money and influence. They pay for a bigger share, if you will. It's for sale, it's being sold. Regrettably, right now in this world, I think that most people associate free markets and crony capitalism as one and the same, when in fact they're opposites. Free market is what it says it is. It's devoid of that government interference. It's a level playing field. So when it comes to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, look, it's not a perfect document, but Bill Weld and myself are the only ones that support the Trans-Pacific Partnership because it makes free trade, it makes it more inevitable, it reduces barriers, it eliminates or gets rid of crony capitalism. We are promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the first 100 days. Why a balanced budget? Well, if we don't balance this budget, we're not going to be a country going forward. Our kids, our grandkids, ourselves, we're going to suffer the consequences of what is going to be runaway inflation to go along with the fact that we continue to print more money to pay for what it is that we're doing. And it's all supply and demand. The more money that's in the system chasing the same goods and services, at some point this is going to be horrible inflation. So balancing the federal budget, this is something that's really important. Neither Donald Trump nor Hillary Clinton are addressing the entitlements in any way whatsoever, and that's Medicaid and that's Medicare. And we do believe in a safety net, and we do believe that a safety net can and has to be established. But if we allow those programs to go unchecked, there won't be any health care for anybody. And with regard to Social Security, look, it's not cutting Social Security, but there are some reforms that have to go along with Social Security that if we don't enact those reforms, it's not going to be around for any of us. And if we dig our heads in the sand, it's just not going to happen. Taxes. Count on Bill Weld. Look, we're not getting elected dictator. We're not getting elected king. We're getting elected president, vice president of the United States. And there are constitutional limits to being president and vice president of the United States. So in the context of those constitutional requirements, look, count on us to make taxes simpler. Count on us to do that. Count on us to not raise taxes at all. Neither of us, serving 2 terms as governor in each of our respective states, raised taxes 1 penny between us. Not 1 penny. Count on us to support lower taxes. Count on us to support simplifying taxes. Count on us to lower taxes, simplify taxes. But if I could wave a magic wand, I would eliminate income tax. I would I would eliminate corporate tax, and I would replace it with one federal consumption tax. If we had one federal consumption tax, I believe tens of millions of jobs would get created in this country for no other reason than having a zero corporate tax rate. In 2012, they did an analysis of which person running for president had the best record when it came to jobs. Well, Rick Perry was beating his chest that he had the best record. Well, it turns out that Gary Johnson had the best record when it came to jobs. And my response then is what it is today. Government, I didn't create one single job. Government doesn't create jobs, the private sector does. And if we had zero corporate tax, which, by the way, we pay for corporate tax. We're the ones that pay for corporate tax. If we had zero corporate tax, tens of millions of jobs would happen in this country. And 80% of Washington lobbyists would get issued pink slips because that's why they're there, to garner special tax favor. That's why they are there. We should be embracing immigration. We are a country of immigrants. The Wharton School of Business, let's see, Wharton School of Business, that's where Trump got his degree, wasn't it? Wharton School of Business about 3 weeks ago came up with and did an analysis. What if we restricted immigration? Well, that would actually have a negative impact on our economy. What if we allowed for high-skilled immigrants to come into this country and increase that only? Well, that would have a minor positive impact on the economy. But if we allowed for immigration in a big way, it would have a really big positive impact on the economy. The notion of deporting 11 million undocumented workers is grounded in absolute misinformation. These are hard-working people who, just like you and I, if those jobs exist, we would make our way across the border to get those jobs because we couldn't get across legally. So we should make it as easy as possible for someone that wants to come into this country to get a work visa, to get a work visa. And we should not build a wall across the border. We build a wall across the border. The president of Mexico is going to stand on the outside of that wall and say, President of the United States, take that wall down, and that person, that president of Mexico, is going to be on the right side of history. It will be a stain on what this country stands for. You know, Donald Trump is watching the Olympics really closely. How high do those Mexican pole vaulters go? Higher than his towers. Free markets, health care in this country. Look, when it comes to healthcare, what is needed when it comes to healthcare is a genuine free market approach to healthcare. And by the way, healthcare is about as far removed from free market as it possibly can be. If we had a free market for healthcare, we would not have insurance to cover ourselves for ongoing medical need. We would have insurance to cover ourselves for catastrophic injury and illness, and we would pay as you go in a system that I'm going to guess would cost about 1/5 of what it currently costs. There would be advertised pricing, there'd be advertised outcomes. Right now we go to the doctor, we have no idea what it's going to cost. They have no idea what it's going to cost. There's no advertised outcome, and then when you get your bill, you know that no one is going to actually pay that. I do agree with Chief Justice Roberts, who said that President Obama's health care plan is a tax. I haven't been to see a doctor in 3 years, and my health insurance premiums have quadrupled, and I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of you that are in the same situation. I believe if we had term limits in this country, that would be acceptable. Politicians would do the right thing as opposed to whatever it takes to get reelected. We would not have a $20 trillion debt today if we had term limits. And libertarians are all about choice. Wherever choice is available, that's what you and I as individuals want. We want the freedom and liberty to make choices in our own lives as long as those choices don't put others in harm's way. So marriage equality is a good thing. How can there be a decision in anyone's life, in any woman's life, harder than abortion? How can there be a more difficult choice? But who is the person that should make that decision? When it comes to that decision, the woman involved should be making that decision. We need to legalize marijuana in this country. Nevada, you rock. You got a chance to do it, and you're gonna do it. You're gonna make it happen. We have the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world, and I refuse to believe that we are any less law-abiding in this country than any other country. It has to do with the war on drugs. There are tens of millions of Americans who are convicted felons in this country that, but for our drug laws, would otherwise be tax-paying, law-abiding citizens. I believe in school choice, bringing competition to public education. And who should determine education in Nevada? Nevadans should determine education in Nevada, not the federal government. So looking at the federal government and the Department of Education, and this doesn't just apply to the Federal Department of Education. By extrapolation, this applies to just about everything that the federal government does. But Nevada gives Washington 13 cents for education. And then the educational department gives Nevada back 11 cents. How do you like that trade? And then Washington says, hey, to get your 11 cents, you've got to do A, B, C, and D. Well, to do A, B, C, and D, it costs 15 cents. So really, it costs Nevadans 6 cents just to have Washington really, I'm going to say, nothing. How about leaving the 6 cents in Nevada and let Nevadans decide how to best... I am opposed to the death penalty as public policy. It sounds good, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, but guess what? As public policy, it doesn't work. I don't know if you remember Governor Ryan in the 90s ordering a review of 36 inmates on death row. And when he ordered that review of inmates on death row, over 20 of them were released because categorically they were proven to be innocent. Apparently, the death penalty has an error rate that may be as high as 4%. I don't want to put one person to death to punish 999 that are guilty, much less 96 to death for 4 that are innocent. It's flawed public policy. It costs less to lock a person up for the rest of their lives because of the attorney fees involved with the appeals that go along with being on death row. And guess what? When somebody is released on death row because they haven't committed the crime, how can you, the cost of an attorney really ends up being priceless. And guns in this country. Look, I support the Second Amendment. We support the Second Amendment. But we should be open to a discussion, a debate on how we keep guns out of the hands of the mentally ill. I mean, we should be open to that discussion. And we should be open to a discussion on how we keep guns out of the hands of would-be terrorists. We should be open to that discussion. And as President of the United States, I would love to understand what transpired between the FBI and the shooter in Orlando, in that they actually interviewed him a couple of times. I'll bet they have some real ideas about how we should move forward. And the military. Look, there's three legs to this. Yeah, and let's all give a really big shout out to all of the veterans. There was a poll done a couple of weeks ago among active military personnel on whom they favored to be President of the United States. I walked away with that, 39%. And what that says is that we will have an impenetrable and invincible national defense. But when we involve ourselves militarily in regime change, it has the unintended consequence of making things worse, not better. When we militarily intervene, things have unintended consequence. And you can't make this up. And it wasn't really purposeful, but Iraq, and we're involved in regime change, had the unintended consequence of really birthing ISIS, if you will. Hillary and Obama, not intended, but they go in and they back the opposition in both Libya and Syria. They back the opposition, they arm the opposition. Well, the opposition is aligned with ISIS. And when the opposition gets beat, the arms end up in ISIS hands, and these are our men and service women that end up giving their lives in a situation that is brought about from unintended consequence. Make no mistake, if we are attacked, we will attack back. Right now, ISIS is regionally contained. We're going to finish that fight. It's like sands through an hourglass, but we will finish that fight. Afghanistan is an example of we should get out of Afghanistan tomorrow. Originally, and I supported it originally, we were attacked. We went in to get Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. But after 7 months, we got rid of Al-Qaeda. We could have left our options open to come back for Osama bin Laden. But look, for all of the negative consequence that will occur tomorrow for getting out of Afghanistan, those same circumstances are going to exist 20 years from now, if that's when we decide to get out, or for some, I guess we're just going to be there forever. Has America ever been better? Really, it hasn't ever been better. We get along better with one another. We communicate better. Our kids are smarter than ever. And the #1 law enforcement tool in the world right now are in our pockets is a smartphone. It's a better world today. We're communicating, and we do have issues. We have issues. Black lives do matter because because there's a 6 times more likelihood you'll be shot if you're black as opposed to white. And the war on drugs, there's a 4 times more likelihood you'll end up behind bars if you are of color as opposed to being white. So we do have issues, and we've got to be aware of these issues, and we will improve. Thank you all so much for being here. You have no idea how much this means. No idea. This is just over the top fantastic. Thank you very, very much. You rock. Absolutely rock. Thank you.
to move to our question and answer. I want to introduce, where is Jason Wyman? Where are you? Jason Wyman, let's give him a big round of applause. He's the National Youth Director for the Youth Council Weld. So here's what we're going to do. So now, they've got some questions, right, Jason?
We do. We've got a line of people interested in what Governor Johnson and Weld have to say.
Excellent. So why don't you take over from here and let's introduce our first person with a question.
This is Stormy.
Hello, good evening, Governor Johnson, Governor Weld. The name is Stormy, Las Vegas resident, Nevada resident. My question is, which political party do you think best represents the ideals of the original American dream?
The Libertarian Party.
Why?
The Libertarian Party is the only party that emphasizes that the Constitution is a document of enumerated powers, and our government is a government of enumerated powers. And the 10th Amendment, which is part of the Bill of Rights, says that the powers not expressly conferred on the federal government by this document, the Constitution, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. A lot of people in Washington have forgotten about that in their zeal to try to prove that absolutely everything is necessary and proper to enable Congress to carry its powers into execution. But that's not the original intent of the framers. And I think it'd be great for the balance between government and the individual. And the Libertarian Party is about nothing if not the power, the supreme power of the individual to enjoy freedom and liberty.
Look, if Trump or Clinton gets elected, it's going to be more polarized than ever. I mean, come on, everybody can see that. Suppose you elect a couple of libertarians, a couple of former Republican governors serving in heavily Democrat states, having gotten reelected, that are going to hire Democrats and Republicans and libertarians. Everybody will be libertarian leaning. And call out both sides to come to the table. And because we would be a bipartisan administration, it would really be hard to say that it was partisan. It would be really hard, I think, to not come to the table. At least I think it's a compelling argument.
Good evening, Governor. My name is Dave, and I'm a combat veteran, and as such, I was curious as to a few of the steps in detail that you would take to reduce the defense budget.
Well, the BRAC Commission, you're all familiar with the BRAC Commission. And by the way, we're promising an invincible national defense. But the BRAC Commission that was set up by the Pentagon recommended that 20% of U.S. bases could actually be closed. Well, that hasn't happened. And the target number for reducing the military is 20%, and that would not be compromising our military strength in any way whatsoever.
No, it's not as though we singled out defense among all sectors of the federal government. I've never seen a layer of government that I didn't think had 10 or 20% in the budget that could be cut out. Never, any level. And what Gary and I both did that enabled us to cut our budgets and balance our budgets was not to assume that every single appropriation is going to go up every year. In Washington, they not only assume every appropriation is going to go up, if it doesn't go up by 5%, they call that a cut, even if inflation is 2%. And that's the kind of thinking that gets you runaway deficits. So we're going to go across the board. If we find, say, a preventive health care program that's producing great outcomes, we might quadruple that appropriation. But if we find a bureaucracy that's not doing anything except using up a lot of inputs, meaning money, that might be very well zeroed out.
Hi, my name's Corey. I'm very interested to hear how your plan to get to 15% by the debate cutoff. I'm really excited to hear about it too.
Well, right now, social media, we're reaching 27 million people right now. But what is very significant is over the last 3 weeks, that's a doubling of that number. And if you go back 3 weeks earlier than that, that's a double of that number 3 weeks before that. So it really does look good. And I know that Bill mentioned this before, but we're raising millions of dollars right now, something that hasn't happened before. And when 70% of the population doesn't even know who we are, the portent is really good that spending that money on communicating who it is that we are. I think we have a really great shot of being in the presidential debates, and neither of us would be doing this if there weren't the opportunity to win. That's the idea.
Hi, my name is Taylor Everett, and I have a question. As libertarians who don't like government intervention in economy, with advances in autonomous technology and progress being made in artificial intelligence, does there come a point in time where the role for the government to protect jobs can be automated?
Well, first of all, artificial intelligence, and maybe I'm not understanding the tail end of the question, but artificial intelligence, genetics, oh my gosh, I mean, it really is an exciting future. And when you look at, and I think also, maybe you're talking about disruptors. You know, the #1 occupation in this country is driver. That's the #1 occupation in this country, and in 10 years, I dare say that everything is going to be automated, and it's going to start with trucking. So, huge disruptor. I mean, but all good. I mean, the driverless car. Oh my gosh! I'm going to get to be an old guy, and I'm going to get to sit in my driverless car and say, take me to the grocery store, and I'm going to get there safely, and I'm going to come back, and there'll be sleeper cars. I predict that you know, you'll be able to get in your car, go to sleep. It'll find its way to plug itself in along the way. I mean, I just think the future is terribly exciting.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Courtney Carity, Nevada resident, and I wanted to ask you, if you were elected president, you'd likely have a Congress that remains heavily polarized under control of Democrats and Republicans, or Republicans. What do you think you can accomplish with a legislature that likely has little interest in supporting your agenda?
Well, Gary touched on this earlier, but in Washington, I think that they might be relieved to have someone in the White House who wasn't lecturing them and making sanctimonious, self-serving speeches about how, you know, they were wrong and we in the White House were right. And you know, one of the charming things about Gary, and TV anchors have commented on this, is that he doesn't wade into a room and say, my way or the highway. He'll say, gosh, that's a very interesting idea, and I'm not sure I had that one absolutely right at all times in the past. And that would be, frankly, refreshing after years and years of hearing from presidents of both parties. Okay, we're sending this to Congress, and they can either do it our way, which is the right way, or they could be really, really stupid and not do exactly as we say. That's what we've heard from the White House for a long time. They wouldn't hear that from us. And as Gary said, we're going to hire the best and brightest and hardest working people we can find, obviously in the Libertarian Party, but also in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And that will be appreciated to some degree by both parties, knowing that a good percentage of the government are their people. You know, I never asked anyone when I was making cabinet appointments or any appointment whether they were a Democrat or a Republican. And I never knew. You know, for all I know, they were all Democrats. I don't think they were. But the result was that there was no animosity and there was no tension. And when I sent something onto Beacon Hill, it didn't arrive dead on arrival or ionized, with this highly charged impetus behind it. And that would be a refreshing thing in Washington.
Governor Johnson, Governor Weld, thank you for being here. And the question I wanted to ask was, when the Libertarian ticket was the presidency, what role do you think executive authority should be, and how should it be used? Should it be used the way that President Obama and President Bush has used it to circumvent Congress?
If you're talking about executive orders are an essential tool of being the executive. So as governor of New Mexico, look, laws get passed and there's an interpretation on how you actually carry out that law, and executive orders on how you actually accomplish that. The question was asked earlier, what do you do about a divided Congress? Well, just for a second, pretend that nothing passes, nothing comes out of Congress. If you have certainty that rules and regulations are actually going to be about equal opportunity, that can happen. And executive orders to accomplish that. So executive orders are really a tool of the executive that you have to actually the go-between between the law and the actual administration and carrying out of that law. Do you know, I understand that the NSA was an executive order under Truman, Executive Order 12333. If such is the case, it seems to me there could be an executive order to turn the satellites away from all of us. Are we the enemy?
That is all true. A number of President Obama's executive orders have been highly controversial. People have criticized him as going beyond the proper boundaries of executive power. I was kind of sympathetic to his executive order on immigration, even though it was very controversial, because, I felt sorry for those DACA kids, and Congress wouldn't act, and I thought Congress should have acted. Slightly more controversial are some of the executive orders in the environmental area, where people have argued that it goes beyond statutory authority. And I think in general, Gary and I being somewhat less pro-government and pro-big government than standard residents of Washington, D.C., we might sometimes be more conservative about executive orders than others might be.
Hello there. My name is Ashley McLeod, and I do have a quick question for you guys. And by the way, I want to say thank you for all that you guys are doing and pushing us forward. So thank you. So, can you please explain your position of freedom and transparency of information on the internet, such as WikiLeaks?
So, talking about internet, we don't want to fix anything when it comes to the internet, and I think right now, all the proposals that we're seeing potentially restrict a lot of people in this room from being able to compete in the internet. So our philosophy, our mode of thought is look, in my opinion, all this internet legislation, when they talk about net neutrality, that's crony capitalism, in my opinion, giving power to the big guy as opposed to allowing all of us to have an equal opportunity, and the internet is equal opportunity for all of us. I mean, there is just, all of us can be something overnight on the internet, and if government gets involved, that's going to get more and more restricted.
Good evening, Governors. My name is Shane. I have a question. Recently, Trump talked about increasing the tariff on steel from China and India to 400% to increase the market value of steel in the U.S. What do you guys feel about that?
Look, we are definitely, and did you say steel? Steel. Look, in a free market approach to the economy, you don't apply tariffs. If China wants to subsidize the steel that they're sending to the United States, who benefits and who loses? And if you talk about steel jobs being lost from manufacturing steel, think about all the steel erection jobs that will exist because they're going to subsidize our buildings to the tune of 40%. They can't sustain that. Free market, you've got bubbles in free market, but if the government's going to interfere, if China wants to subsidize the goods that it sends to you and I, who benefits from that and who ultimately loses from that?
I'm not sure, frankly, how knowledgeable Mr. Trump is about the global economy and global trade. Now, he has a lot of harsh words for the WTO, the World Trade Organization. He says China should never become a member there. Well, the United States has twice sued China in the WTO, complained about China, on the ground of China subsidizing their exports, which is improper. And in both cases, the WTO ruled in favor of the United States and against China. I don't even know if Mr. Trump knows that. So there's something of an argument for these international arbitral bodies. Mr. Trump talks as though, whenever there's free trade between countries, that the good is made entirely in one country and consumed entirely in the other country. There ain't too many automobiles in the world now that are made all in one country. The raw materials might come from 3 countries. The intermediate work might be done in 3 other countries. The finished work might be done in a 7th country. So when you're adding up all the pluses and minuses, it's not a single zero-sum game. But this analysis is very superficial.
I want to thank all of you again for coming. I think we've got time for about three more questions, but cannot thank you all enough. You have no idea how much this means, really.
My name is Joe Sacco, and as a former supporter of Bernie Sanders, I'm very, very afraid of the implications of the TPP trade deal. Specifically, I'm worried about the effect on unions and working families, as well as the environment. I'm an undecided voter at this time. I want to give it a shot, but I'm worried that the TPP will destroy the nation's sovereignty.
So, go ahead.
I think the most important thing about the TPP, and I'll get to the unions and those issues, but it gives us a trading platform in Asia with free and open trade with 11 Asian countries that do not include China. So it's like an enormous beachhead in China's backyard. And there are a lot of tensions right now between China and neighboring countries, not just the East China Sea and the South China Sea. There are trade and economic tensions as well. So it's like giving us a perch right there in the middle of Asia. Now, there are cavils and criticisms that are made that the TPP doesn't do enough for working conditions in Vietnam. And, this happened with NAFTA, with virtually every free trade treaty. You didn't stick it to the guys about conditions in their countries enough. I think those are secondary in the face of the enormous economic benefits to the United States, but also strategic on that one.
No, we do believe, and we're not operating here in a vacuum. So personally, I have reservations about TPP from the standpoint of crony capitalism, and us not operating in a vacuum with people that we really respect, really free market economists, Mercatus, Cato Institute. Even though TPP is not a perfect instrument, it does advance free trade. It does reduce crony capitalism, and I realize that is perhaps not a majority of opinion of a lot of people, but it is the reality.
It very much improves our strategic position as a country in the world.
And one of the pledges that we're going to make as president and vice president is nothing is perfect, but count on us to support anything that makes things better. And the bottom line on TPP is I think it makes things better. It's not a perfect instrument. And thanks for...
Governor Johnson, thank you so much, and Governor Weld. I've loved this night. You're just singing to the choir for me. And I want to follow up on something that I don't know how well it's been reported in the press. I'm grateful for this opportunity to hear from you on freedom of religion. For me, freedom of religion is not about shooting other people. Freedom of religion is being able to choose what I believe and being able to act on that choice. How would you protect freedom of religion as President of the United States?
Well, so freedom of religion. I support freedom of religion. All right, I support freedom of religion. But the question, or what's been being passed all across the country, are freedom of religion legislation that really discriminates against the LGBT communities. That's what freedom of religion bills have done. Utah is a great example of where a freedom of religion bill passed, where the church did not have to conduct a ceremony. For example, a Christian or a Jewish synagogue would not have to host a Christian reception or a Muslim reception, or vice versa. Marriages would not have to be performed within a Catholic church if that was the antithesis of the Catholic Church. But they also passed legislation that protected LGBT rights. And I'm fearful, or at least this is the issue that I've raised, is that the legislation that has passed will allow for discrimination that currently does not exist, and we just don't want to be part of discrimination of any kind. You want to follow up on that? The Civil Rights Bill of 1964, those that opposed the Civil Rights Bill in 1964 said that businesses should be able to discriminate. Government shouldn't be able to discriminate. That was 1964. We would have signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And I think that this is going back on that and trying to do carve-outs that I believe this. I think that under the guise of religious freedom for a business owner, that virtually anything could be discriminated against.
Would you like to follow up?
Yeah, please.
So I understand that. I think if you're in business, then do business. But I'm talking specifically about freedom of religion, which I do not think has been accurately reported of your opinion in the press. But it always gets confused with this LGBT issue. For me, freedom of religion is not about LGBT issues. But it always gets meshed with that when they report it for you. So I just want to know, on freedom of religion, what is your stance for my ability to worship how, where, and what I may?
That's not under any challenge whatsoever. And as I understand the Utah statute to which Gary referred, one of the wonderful things about that compromise was that the church can do anything it wants to do as a church in furtherance of its religion and its doctrines. Is that fair to say? And that's freedom of religion.
So I don't think we're sideways on this issue. No sideways.
All right, this is going to be our last question.
And again, thank you all.
My name is David. As you may know, there's a movement in Congress to transfer management of public lands from the federal government to the states. As you also know, both as former governors, that's primarily a Western state issue, and Western states, for the most part, don't have the budget to manage the lands where the federal agencies currently are. Do you have a strong stand on the transfer of management of federal lands to the states?
Well, that it would reside within the states. Now, there are three kinds of, and there are probably more, but really three kinds of federal land: wilderness, national forest, and then BLM land. I'm certainly not in favor of giving Forest Service land, wilderness land to the states. But with regard to BLM lands, I think there's a real opportunity for states that want to take on that responsibility and the benefits that would go along with that to do that. And I am speaking now specifically about BLM lands.
And if the result is that land will then be auctioned off and the states can't afford to manage it to private individuals?
Well, right now, do you know that for the most part, that BLM land is checkerboard in sections, that it's black squares and it's red squares. So oftentimes you'll see that a rancher in Nevada or in New Mexico has a 20,000 acre ranch. 10,000 of those acres are leased, 10,000 of those acres are private. Well, that's red squares and it's geometric. It's red squares and it's black squares. To be able to give up the black squares or allow the property owner who owns the red squares to buy the black squares and have those squares become part of the property tax rolls, you know, to me it makes a lot of sense. And nothing is categorical, but it makes a lot more sense. When back east they passed legislation that says that you have to allow for access to public lands, which makes sense. I mean, when you hear it, sure, we should have access to public lands. Well, how do you get to red squares when it's red squares and black squares? I mean, you can't even get there. So it's an issue that I don't think for the most part people understand.
Okay, thank you very much again, everybody. Good night to you all. Thank you. Thank you.